quarantined in our homes, you know, it's late here. Anyways, we did get to spend the day playing with the portaledge, and putting together a few videos for you guys. Let me see if I can share the screen. Ross, can you see that?
Yeah.
Ross,
yeah.
Can you see my screen there?
It says that you've started sharing your screen. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
So so this is kind of the scene here right now. We're also having to do the sort of enforced social distancing here. So if you kind of go out beyond the house more than like a kilometer, you get stopped by the police and everything. But you can see here like the Mont Blanc in the background, and then some kind of famous Chamonix folks. If you can name this alpinist lying down here, then Ross will probably also give you some sort of prize. But you might hear him later in a video. Let me see if I can get back to the video here. Oh crap. Hang on. Stop share. Okay. Very good. You guys can all see me? And Ross, you're muted, Ross, just so you know.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Right on. So I'm just going to get started. We don't have that much time, and there's actually quite a bit to go through. So I assume there's a mix of people here kind of tuning in for this G7 pod kind of overview. Probably some of you, maybe you could raise your hands if you actually have the pod. Some of you probably have the pod, and some people might be curious about getting it. There might be people here who've done big walls before with normal portaledges, frame portaledges. There might be people who've never done a big wall before. I think only Ross can see the hand raises. I can't see anyone's hand raises, but I'm assuming there's a mixture of people out there. So I'm just going to go through sort of the general idea behind this pod, and then I'll show you the basics of how to set it up. And for anyone who's done walls before, you know that, hang on, there's a new message. Okay, Heather Lewis has no idea what the G7 pod is. Thank you, Heather. That's all right. We're going to be getting into that very, very shortly here. There's a little preview behind me here. The G7 pod is a portable hanging ledge that you use for sleeping on a big wall like El Capitan or the Chief and Squamish, things like that. So hopefully that makes sense. And I'm not sponsored by these guys or anything, but a year ago when they announced that they were coming out with this thing, I just pulled like a panic buy, and I had to get one and use it because I climb in Yosemite as much as possible. And it's basically like, think of like an inflatable raft, but with the same materials and idea behind an inflatable raft, but with tethers essentially that suspend it from a single point so you can sleep on it. So we're going to get into that really quick. So basically with the pod, you have three things they send you. You have the actual sleeping ledge itself. So each one is the size for one person. So you have this, and then you have their storm shelter. Hopefully that's coming in straight and not reversed. So this is like the the tent cover for the portable ledge. And probably most people out there who've done some big wall climbing, you know that you generally hopefully you don't need to use the shelter on a ledge, but it's pretty important to have it. So I'll talk about that in a minute here. And I'm going to have to mix in some videos with me actually showing you the pod in order that, because I don't have enough space in the apartment. That's why I'm going to show you some videos from today. So first thing I'm going to do is show you the shelter, simply because the order that you use these in when you go and hang it on the wall So when you get to your anchor, you clip in the storm shelter first, and then from the storm shelter, you clip in the pod. So that's why I'm just going to show you a small detail about this bugger right here. Okay. So this is basically like, you can think of it like the rain fly on a tent. And it's got 2 openings on the stuff sack. So it's not a normal stuff sack. It's got 2 openings. And each opening is connected to an anchor point. So if you can see, I've got an anchor point here and an anchor point there. And I'm just going to share one detail about this. So when you actually get this thing out of the box, and I will point out that really quick, that the box they send you, I guess they wanted to be a little more environmentally sensitive. So the box they send you is also a poster that you can hang on your wall. So that's pretty cool. So anyways, back to what I was talking about. When they send you this, the pod and the shelter and everything, it's going to come with this approximately 60 or 80 centimeter long sling, and it doesn't come set up. So what you have to do, and what I've already done, is, it's untied when you get it, and you have to thread it through this little hat here. You can see there's a little hole, and I've actually threaded the sling through here like that. It's pretty ingenious. So that when you clip this to the anchor, like so, you have underneath it your full strength tie-in loop. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to leave this aside for now because it's not the most important piece of the kit to talk about because it's one of the things that you'll probably rarely use. So just to check in, I haven't seen any comments here, but is everyone following me so far? Okay, cool. And one little detail about one more detail about this is, so the G7 pods are basically, they're called pods because they're each the size of one person, which you'll see in a moment. So in order to make a ledge for 2 people, you have to buy 2 pods, and the 2 pods go together like this. They clip together, and then this essentially a storm cover is designed to go over either 1 or 2, so you don't have to buy 2 different storm covers. It works for both. But in order to do that, you actually have a zipper. This whole door can be removed, and when you remove the door, then the storm shelter, in a sense, is the same, is the perfect size for 1 shelter. And then when you put the door back in, it works for 2. So that's just a little detail. Unfortunately, G7 hasn't put out a manual yet, but I spent a couple hours on the phone with the guy who designed all this stuff, and they're working on that. So right now, I am the closest thing you have to a manual. So hopefully, you'll get all your questions answered today. Okay, so Heather is stoked because it's built for cliffside cuddling. Exactly, that's exactly what it's built for. We'll talk more about that in a sec. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you a little tour here of the actual final product, and then I'm going to go back to the table and I'll show you how to put it together. So hopefully everyone's with me here. So this is and this is the abode right here. And just FYI, it's kind of cool that the wall art at my house is actually Yosemite, so it's sort of fitting that we're doing the portaledge talk during the ski festival in my house. Anyways, back to the shelter. So this is what it looks like. Does that make sense now for everyone? I'm gonna give you a little tour. Dun, dun, dun. And it clips in to a central anchor point. So we'll kind of get into this in a little bit, but one thing that you always run into with big wall climbing is you're always having to tweak the length on everything so that when you're actually, sleeping in the ledge, it's the perfect length for you. But there's no one setting that's the perfect setting. It depends on how steep the cliff is, if it's a slab or if it's overhung, and so on and so forth. So right here you can see that I have clipped. So the ledge has two sides. It has webbing on the left side and on the right side. And each side comes up to a different point. And so you just have to make one side longer than the other in order to essentially let it be flat so it's comfortable to sleep on. Okay. Remember, the box is also art, so you can reuse the box. Okay, so this is the actual pod. I'm going to take it out and show you how it gets blown up. So when you take it out of the stuff sack, you basically have what looks like almost like a sleeping pad, right? And on the end of the sleeping pad, the stuff sack is attached. So this is what's pretty brilliant. These guys worked with that company. I think it's called Seal, Sea to Sky, or Seal something. And so they made a stuff sack that also has a pump. And so the pump gets plugged into the valve here. So you see stuff sack, pump, valve. And so this is the closed position on the valve. There's basically two parts to it. So there's the first part you can open, and you open that if you want to add air with this guy. It goes in like this. Or if you want to completely take the air out at the end, you open it all the way up. So I'll just show you how you blow it up. You plug it in like that, right? And then you basically, it eliminates the need to blow into it all. So I'm just going to go like this. It takes a little bit of time, a few minutes. should have said before, it's a good time for a bathroom break if anyone needs one. We're almost done. A little bit like watching paint dry. And then we're almost done. You just basically pump it until the bag's not strong enough to pump anymore. Cool. So now I can't really get any more in there. So I'm just gonna take out the bag, right? And then I'm gonna put that in. So it does take a bit of time, and if any of you are experienced using a normal frame portaledge, normally what happens is you get up on the first day of the wall and you realize you can't remember how to do it, and you spend about an hour swearing until you figure it out. This is a little bit easier. So unlike a normal frame portaledge, these things dock head to head rather than 69. So I hope I can say that on international TV, but that's how it is. So what I'm going to do now is get this thing ready to dock over here, and I'm going to show you how that's going to work. So, like I said before, you need to make the outside one longer. So usually use a long thing, but it depends a little bit on your exact situation. So then I'm going to take this guy over here. I'm going to take you guys with me. And it won't be that easy to see this, but then I'm going to show you some good videos that we made today. So essentially, this thing is going to clip into the master point there. Master point there. And then this bugger is going to go again into the same point. So let's just see. All right, that actually looks pretty good considering we're doing this in my kitchen. So one last little detail is in between the two pods, there's a little tab that you have to see right here. It's slippery, but there's a little tab right here, and this thing has to poke through. Well, there's one tab on this one, one tab on the other one. So what I'm going to do is get a little carabiner for you. And the tab basically has to poke through one without dropping my computer on the floor. And so that's how they attach. Et voila. I'm going to do the other two, and then I'll put and then I'll hop on in there. One sec. All right, almost done. All right, hope everyone can see that. I'm gonna hop in there and see how we go. So this is in my in my kitchen off the hangboard. So if I go down and I don't get back up, just call the medics. All right. Like that. We can go again, like that. So that's the basics of how it looks. I'm going to show you guys a couple of videos so you can see it up off the ground. One sec there. Share screen. You can start with this one. Actually, right.
Looks like Danny had some computer issues there. Let's just give him a second to come back online there. Like he was mentioning, a great time to use the washroom, maybe go find a beer.
I think I'm back on. Am I back on there, Ross?
Yeah, you're back on.
Okay, cool. Thanks. All right, I'm gonna go back with the. I'm gonna share just a couple little quick vids. How much? I've only got a few more minutes. Is that right, Ross? Okay, cool. I think there's just too many people downloading Netflix here in France. Let me try that one more time. And this was the one I was looking for. Okay. So, standard, setup. You're gonna climb up the rope. The main thing there, like I said, is you need to have a cut-off T-shirt. So this is what it looks like getting it out of the bag and into the anchor. Just make sure one thing here real quick. One sec. So here we got the fly. Is set this bad boy up on my map. Happen from this point. And then from here, you basically just blow it up. I just took the first ledge out and it's all set up now. So now what we've got here is we've got, you can see the red thing is the storm shelter, and then the bottom thing there is the actual ledge. Boom, boom, boom. Blah, blah, blah. You already saw this. Okay. So you can see that it's pretty stable to stand on and everything like that. You always want to be clipped in to a different part. The actual ledge itself is not strength rated, if that makes any sense. So you can kind of get in there like that, blah, blah, blah. Just one more thing there.
Danny, you're looking so buff these days. Thanks. Yeah. Things are getting serious.
All right.
No.
Just do that?
Yeah, okay, ready.
So yeah, I had it actually. I fell out of it before, but this is kind of what it looks like when it's set up.
Okay.
And then this is what it looks like putting it back together.
Stuff while hanging in the void. I agree. Gravity. The fourth.
So. And then the very last one there. Okay, so stop share. Okay, so before I go, because I think I've used up most of my time, I just want to make sure, because I can't see the chat window there. Cool, I think you can see it now. Just want to make sure you guys saw that there's basically 4 different ways you can set up the ledge. Let's say you're a party of 2. So one way you can set up the ledge as a party of 2 is just take each ledge and put it in a different anchor point independently somewhere else. Like for example, on free climbing routes and El Cap and other big walls, a lot of times you can find a spot where you can each have your own anchor. So that's a really cool thing about the pod. They're more independent. You don't need to have a sleeping mat with it because they're already insulated, like a high R value. The second way you can set it up is side by side, which is actually, you wouldn't think it, but it's surprisingly stable when you clip them together. And then the third way, so I guess there's 3 ways, would be as the bunk bed configuration. If you're gonna, potentially need to use the Stormfly, it's the only way to really use the Stormfly is when they're together. So you should know that. One thing I didn't get to show you in the demo here is that if you look underneath these shelters, they have a little yellow cord that runs through them, like here. And that cord, it's actually, you can actually hang your haul bag off that, and it will really stabilize the ledge. So according to the engineer who designed this, and according to how it's rated, none of the straps, nothing on the ledge is strength rated to be like life for life critical stuff. So you always need to have a tether to something else, if that makes sense. So aside from that, I don't have much else to add, and I'm a little bit over time, so I'll probably pass it back to Ross. Maybe see if there's any questions about the ledge. These things are pretty complicated to. It's actually simple to set up. You just have to play around with it a little bit, figure out what works for you. And just as sort of a side-by-side comparison, when you would use this versus when you would use a hard framed ledge, these things are about a third of the weight, including the fly. So they're a lot lighter. They're definitely not as stable when they're all set up as a frame ledge, and probably a little more unstable, like walking around on them and hanging out on them. Sleeping wise, they're super comfortable. So I think I would envision using these anywhere where weight or transport is an issue. Any route like that, like, more like far away mountain ranges, or in a place like Yosemite when you're doing more free climbing routes or easier aid routes like the Nose or Salathé or things like that, where you're going to have some terrain that's a little bit ledgy but not good for sleeping. These are going to be really great. So otherwise, I'm looking forward to get out these things. I hope that was a bit helpful. And at that point, I'll pass it back over to Ross, if he's still there. Are you still there?
Sweet. That was great. Thanks, Danny. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, let's try. You can put your hand up and we'll unmute you.
Oh, hi, Robin. Nice to see you out there. Sorry. It's great to see people I know here with us.
Oh, Heather's got a question. Let's see how this works.
Okay.
Go for it, Heather. Oh.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. What's the full name of the setup?
The G7 pod.
Awesome.
And so the thing is, when you if you're going to get one, they sell them. You can kind of buy any component, but realistically, you need at a very minimum, you need one pod, and then your partner would need their own pod, or you can just buy two and the fly. So it's like the complete package.
Hell yeah.
So it's called the G7 pod, and they pretty much sold out. They went on Kickstarter last summer and they sold out, but I'm sure some will be available about the time that we all get out of, being confined to our homes.
Yeah. Sweet.
So,
thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you.
Sweet. Anyone else want to talk on the Zoom? Danny, that was amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Did you guys see the videos?
Yeah, I think they worked pretty good.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks a lot. So I guess I'll good luck for everyone else, and thanks for staying with us. And good night from France.
Night, Danny. Sweet. Okay, I guess it's my turn now. I'm going to talk about knots. So I'm just here in my living room, and I'm going to talk about kind of the kind of key knots that I find that I end up using a lot for ski mountaineering and rock climb mountaineering. Basically, you only need to know a few knots. And so I wanted to talk about this before we go into what Jeff's going to chat about, which is crevasse rescue. Just to have some fundamental knot base, so when we get into more technical stuff, it makes sense. And so I'll go through each knot, and then if you have any questions, just ask after each knot. And then similarly, if there's anything that you would like to learn, maybe I know how to tie that knot, and we can try it online here. So the first one is the most useful knot the old figure 8. And so the figure 8 is generally used just for tying in to your harness or to tie a fixed end at the end of the rope where you can clip that into the anchor. It is probably the most common used knot. So the figure 8, I always like to teach it like I'm teaching children, is to make a snowman head. And then you wrap the scarf around the snowman and you poke him in the eye. And then what you're left with is a figure, a knot that looks like an 8. You can see one common mistake that people will have is they won't wrap the scarf all the way around the neck. They'll only go halfway around the neck, and you'll end up with an overhand knot. So an overhand knot's like your granny knot. You don't know knots, tie lots kind of thing. See the difference there? Overhand, figure 8, wrapping all the way around and through the eye. Cool? Okay. Next is the figure 8 follow through. So if you're tying into your harness, you can basically do the same thing, tie your figure 8, and then you're going to retrace that knot. So I find the biggest thing for me is to measure how much tail you're going to need. So I'll grab the end of the rope and then I'll measure to my opposite shoulder. Okay. And then I'll drop the end of the rope, and then that right-hand side there will create the new snowman head. So I've got all that extra tail, and then I'll do my standard figure 8. And this will leave me enough tail to go through my harness and then retrace the knot. So I just have a ski mounting harness on right now, so I don't have the traditional 2 tie-in points. But you can imagine I'm going to go through the 2 tie-in points, and I'm going to start to retrace the figure 8 knot. So the big trick here to make your knot perfect every time is to not start on the obvious side here. You see how there's like a big hole there? You don't want to start there. You actually want to push the rope to the side to create a little bit of space, and then you're going to start to retrace the knot on that. So if you do that every time, your knot's going to be a lot cleaner once you finish it. And then basically here, all I'm going to do is going to take the end of my rope and retrace every single point of my knot. Here, I don't have to, I can go through all the open holes on my knot, that's fine. It's just that first one that you have to go through the hard side. And then up through the end. Almost lost you. And then what I'm left with is, again, my figure 8 with every single point is doubled. So here I'm going to double check to make sure my knot is correct. I'm just going to count every single point and make sure that they're double. If any part of the knot doesn't have a partner, doesn't have it, it's not doubled up, then you made a mistake with the knot. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then I have ample tail here. Ideally, I'm going to end up with just a fist and a thumb. The reason I have so much here is because my tie-in points are a little bit different than they would on a normal climbing harness. Cool. So that's the figure 8. Any questions about the figure 8? No, such an easy one. Okay. The next is just a figure 8 on a bite. So you can do that same process. And instead of doing it on a singular rope, I'm going to do a doubled figure 8. So if I wanted to clip into an anchor to fix a line, maybe I was going to do a rappel, or I was going to climb up a rope, something like that. I'm going to create a closed loop on the end of the rope. So I'm just going to, again, make that lots of tail, and I'm going to tie that figure 8 the same manner, but everything's going to be doubled up. Now I have that closed loop to clip into my anchor. Again, ample tail. Okay, the next one we're going to talk about is the overhand. So the overhand, again, that's like the one that you've learned from a kid. It's basically just the granny knot. This is what you do before you tie your shoelace, right? You do the simple knot, and then you do the bunny ears. So this is an easy one, but this in itself on a single strand doesn't do you too much. You can retrace it, but it's not as useful as a figure 8 would be. It's because it's really hard to untie. So the one reason that you might be using an overhand would be, say, if you're clipping into a rope on glacier travel. It's a nice small knot to tie as a doubled up. So here I'm gonna imagine I'm clipping into the middle of a rope. It's gonna double my rope up. I'm gonna tie my little overhand knot, and now I can clip into this, right? You can see it's just a lot smaller than a figure eight would be. The one disadvantage here though is it's gonna be a lot harder to untie if it is loaded. So that's an easy one. Okay, so those are the kind of the two common kind of clip-in knots. The next is a fisherman's knot. So if I had to join two different ropes together, so let's say I was, I had to go down a big rappel and I was going to tie two single ropes together to create a lot of length. One of the easiest ways to tie two ropes together is with a single or double fisherman's knot. They're both fine, a single or a double, either of them really is good. For me personally, I like to just go for the double. And it feels better, honestly, and that's the biggest thing. So here I'm gonna have the ropes going in opposite direction. And I'm basically gonna tie that same overhang, which we just did, around the opposite rope, right? So you can see there's my overhand, it's going around the other rope. And then I'm gonna go to the other side and tie the overhand. And when I pull them together, the two overhand knots basically bite on each other, and that's what joins the two ropes together. Now, so this is a single fisherman's knot, right? Because I only did one wrap. And the big thing here to make sure that it's correct is that the knot is symmetrical. As you can see on this side, I have the knot, and then on the other side, it's smooth, right? So that's how I know that I've done that correctly. So here I'll do the double fisherman's, basically same thing. Instead of just doing one wrap and tying my overhand, I'm gonna do a double wrap, hence the name. And I'm basically wrapping my way up the rope and then back through. So I've done an overhand knot, but I just added one extra little wrap. Make sure everything is really nicely set. And again, I can check my knot to make sure that both sides are the same, right? So here I have my X's and the other side, it's smooth. So there is the double fisherman's knot. Again, with anything, make sure you have enough tail. That's one thing that knots, depending on the type of knot, they can unroll themselves a little bit. So just make sure you have ample tail. I always find to say, no matter what my knot is, I'm going to aim to have that fist in the thumb, just like I would with my figure eight knot. Alrighty. Next is the Prusik knot. So if you're doing crevasse rescue and you need to create a bite or some sort of rope grab to haul someone out of the line, or you're doing a rappel, you need like that extra support to hold the rope in case for whatever reason that your hands were knocked free and you weren't able to hold on to the rope anymore. A Prusik will slide on the rope, and when it gets loaded, it will grab tight. So a Prusik, generally speaking, we're going to use a Prusik cord that is 2 mils smaller than the diameter of the rope that you're using. So in this case, this is the 9 mil rope. And so I want to use a 7 mil or smaller Prusik cord. So the Prusik, if I'm tying on a single strand, I can do a 2-wrap Prusik. If I'm tying it onto 2 strands, I can do sorry, I got that backwards. If I'm tying it on a single strand, I'm gonna have a 3-wrap Prusik because I need that extra bite because it's grabbing onto a smaller surface. If I'm tying onto a double strand, I can get away with a double wrap. So I'll start with the 3-wrap on the single strand. So I'm gonna take my Prusik cord, fold it in half, and I'm basically going to do what you would call a girth hitch. So I'm gonna pass the ends of the rope through the loop that I've created. And I've basically just created a little wrap around my climbing rope. And I'm gonna keep doing that until I've done enough wraps, depending on how many cords of rope I'm tying around. So here, I'm gonna do another wrap, again, working my way into the middle. So there's my double wrap Prusik. And then here to do my triple, I'm just gonna add one more loop. And again, I find the trick for me is I just tie it really tight and I just kind of use my fingers to open up and then pass the ends of the rope through. And can set that in place. And again, here, I'm gonna make sure that everything's tied correctly. Everything's really clean. You can see my Prusik is working. It's all clean, nothing's twisted, and it's working from the outside to the inside here. So now I can basically secure this to my anchor if I'm doing crevasse rescue, or I can secure it to my harness if I need to back up for my rappel. So again, if I'm tying on the single fisherman's on double strand, same process, but I'm using 2 ropes. I'm gonna create my bite, and then I'm just gonna add one more loop. And I have my simple double fisherman's knot. Sorry, double Prusik knot. Okay. The next really useful knot in rock climbing and also crevasse rescue is a clove hitch. So for a clove hitch, you're gonna need a carabiner. Now, the clove hitch is a knot that is adjustable. So if I want to clip myself into the anchor, I can use the clove hitch. And then, oh, I need to get a little bit more slack. I can adjust that knot without untying myself. So in a rock climbing context, it's really useful when I get to the top of the pitch. I clove hitch myself into the anchor using my climbing rope. And, well, maybe I need to go a little further down to give myself give my partner beta or take a photo. I can adjust it without taking myself off the anchor so I can stay secure the entire time. So take your knot, cross your hands, and then you're gonna pull your hands apart like you're doing some sort of karate move. Kind of helps as you go, ha! Pretend like you're a karate star. And then you can see here, I've created these 2 loops that are going in opposing direction. And I'm basically gonna take the 2 ends of rope that are dropping down towards my feet, and I'm gonna place them into the middle. So you can see I have 1 loop going that direction and then 1 loop going the other direction. I'm gonna place those 2 free ends into the middle and then clip the whole knot together, and there is my clove hitch. So if I want to adjust it, all I have to do is pull 1 strand through, pull the other, and you can see I can adjust the length of that knot without having it completely unclipped. That's a fun one. The next is a Munter Hitch. So a Munter Hitch isn't that we're kind of getting to the end of what is really commonly used. A Munter Hitch is great if maybe you forgot your belay device and you need to belay someone. In that, a Munter Hitch is a good improvised belay device, or also an improvised rappelling device. It doesn't work great, it tangles the rope up, so I do try and avoid using the Munter Hitch, but it's a really good trick to have in your sleeve, right? I'm sure if you've been rock climbing, the chances of you dropping that belay device is quite high. We could be fumbling between pitches, so it's really important that you know how to have a backup belay or backup rappel. So I learned for me the easiest thing is, again, I'm gonna take my rope in front of my face, and I'm basically just gonna create 1 loop. And then there I've created the end that's going down my feet, and I'm basically gonna close it with another half loop. So I'm gonna roll 90-degree angle, roll it towards me, and then roll the other end going up. And so I have 1 loop, and then I have another half loop. And I'm gonna clip both those strands with my spinner. And now I have a Munter Hitch where I can feed the rope out. I'll clip this into my harness here. So here I can feed the rope out, and if someone were to fall, I'm holding the rope in a parallel position that's going to break. And same thing if maybe I want to rappel, I can just lower myself down. Again, the problem here is it really tangles the rope up. So again, we try and avoid using these as best as possible. The last knot that I want to show is kind of my favorite one. It's more of a guiding context. So, you know, if I'm alpine guiding, I'll often use the Munter Hitch for really quick little belays where I don't want to bother getting my whole, you know, guide ATC set up. I just want to do something really quick. And also I want to go from a belay to securing my client. I'm going to belay with the Munter Hitch. And so I'm belaying up. Great. And then I'm going to do it this way for you. So I'm belaying my client up. And then I want to switch to a Clove Hitch. A nice little trick is you take the brake strand. So the brake strand is the one that's not enclosed in the loop there. I'm going to grab it with a thumbs down motion. And I'm going to bring a loop up, clip it through the beaner, and then create one more other loop. And then when I pull the whole thing apart, it transfers into a Clove Hitch. It's definitely something you got to practice, because if you get it wrong, you just took your partner off belay. So again, the big trick here is that free strand needs to be on the open gate side, grabbing thumbs down to create a loop, and then adding one more. And then as you pull, it turns all the way to the Clove Hitch. That is it. Those are my top knots. So does anyone have any questions? You can raise your hand. So many questions. Brian. Hey, Brian.
Can you show the Munter Mule?
Oh, yeah. Did you say the Munter Mule?
Yeah.
But yeah, tying off the Munter Hitch.
Yeah.
So get my little somehow to hold my. Here, I'll make my anchor the necklace here. Okay, so let's say that this is my load strand. So I'm going to take this will be my brake strand, and I'm going to do a half hitch, and then I'm going to put a bite through the loop that I just created. Tighten that up. And then the big thing here is I'm trapping that loop that I've created. So if I do it the other way and I put a loop through it, it's not going to tighten down on itself. So here what I like to just do is roll it towards myself, put the bite through, tighten that up. And then in this case with my climbing rope, I'm just going to tie another overhand knot just to double check. Because even if I messed up that first part, that overhand knot is probably gonna keep us safe anyway. If you're using a Prusik and you have just a small amount of tail, you can, instead of doing the overhand, you can just put that free end of the tail through. Cool. Any other questions? Patrick.
Hey, Ross. I was wondering what diameter Prusik are you using on your Rad Line? Are you using 4 then, if that's a 6 mil?
Well, I have 5 mil. I find when the ropes get that small diameter, that 2 mil difference doesn't matter as much. So I do have a little bit of 5 mil with my Rad Kit, but you know, I've never had to use it. As long as you had all your tools, you should be able to get away without using a Prusik.
All right. Thank you.
The problem with the 5 mil is it's not that strong at that point, right? And even at 4, you know, it just wouldn't be strong enough to be used on its own.
Great. Thanks.
All right. Sweet. Okay. It's probably enough of hearing me talk about knots. So our next up is Jeff Mitchell. So Jeff is a IFMJ mountain guide out of Revelstoke, and he runs a guiding business, Revelstoke Mountain School, that focuses on instruction and objective-based guiding for skiing, rock climbing, and mountain climbing. And he is going to talk about just that, how to use the Rad Line.
Hey, can you hear me? Is this working?
You can hear you, it's working.
Oh, nice. Hey guys, yeah, I'm just gonna spend a little bit of time here, the next 20 minutes or so, talking about lightweight rope kits and how to use them and their pros and cons, and maybe we'll talk about I'll talk about some tips and tricks here if I can figure out how to use Zoom. Yeah, and thanks a lot, Ross, for putting this together and you know, bringing it online. It's pretty wicked. It's great to, you know, think about being out in the mountains again and thinking about some of these tools that we use on a regular basis. And it was fun to put this presentation together and look through some old photos and stuff too. It's been great. So lightweight rope kits, pros and cons, tips and tricks. Here we go. I'll do my best. So the overview, I'll talk about what a lightweight rope kit is, the uses for lightweight rope kits, and then just the advantages and disadvantages of using the lightweight kit versus a regular climbing rope. So, and then we'll open up the floor for some questions. So what is a lightweight rope kit? So these are like a small diameter, low stretch, really light cords that are specialized. They're super specialized. We've been starting to use them a lot for glacier travel and for crevasse rescue, and it's like quickly becoming a go-to for a glacier rope these days in my backpack. That being said, they are a super specialized piece of equipment, and they require a little bit of knowledge about the equipment, the limitations, and the gear that we need to use with them. There's a couple of different lightweight rope kits out there. My go-to is the Petzl Rad Kit. So that's the one pictured here in the slideshow, and that's the one I'm going to talk about. I'm going to kind of talk mostly about the Rad Kit. Sterling has one out there that they designed a couple of years ago, and it works really great. It just has a couple of you know, other pieces to it that I find are you know, even more challenging to use, and find that, you know, we had to really practice with it even more in order to use those devices and put them together. And I found that, you know, using that device in a stressful situation would be even a little bit more difficult. The downside of the Petzl Rad Line versus the Sterling Quickie Descender kit. The Sterling kit that Kirk Mothner designed a bunch of years ago, it is not load limiting. So given a certain load, 4 kilonewtons, it'll actually start to slide in one of the devices instead of you know, shock loading it and you know, transferring all those forces onto an anchor or onto somebody that's using it in a rescue situation. So yeah, I'll just show you a couple of things here that I usually carry in my kit. So the Petzl Rad Line, the system, it comes with one of these wicked little pieces of cord. It's 6 millimeters in diameter, and it has a a strength of 8 kilonewtons here, which is a fair bit lower than a climbing rope. The big difference between the Rad Line and a regular climbing rope, aside from its lightweight and thin diameter, is its low stretch. So it's basically a static cord. With that being said, I mean, it's such a skinny little cord. We need some specific tools in order to use this in crevasse rescue. So the tools that I carry around with it, I have a small piece of 5mm Prusik that that we can use as a rope grab, or we can use to move around on the rope if we need to give ourselves a quick little belay up to the lip of a crevasse or something like that. We also need a specific progress capture when we're using it for crevasse rescue. So Petzl recommends using the micro traction, and then for a rope grab, they recommend that we use the tib lock, and you use that with all the tests that they've done. They've used that with one of these attaché carabiners. So the difference between some of the other devices out there, a couple of different companies are starting to make these wicked little progress captures. This guy and what Petzl has done is they've gone through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tests with this equipment, and they've basically made it so that they allow us to carry this and use this both recreationally and when we're guiding. So yeah, that's what it is. Unfortunately, I don't have one of the Sterling ropes here to demonstrate that and to show you guys, but there's tons of information online. All right, so what do we use these lightweight rope kits for? We can use them for rappelling, we can use them for glacier travel, and we can use them for crevasse rescue. Just noticing some of my spelling errors there. Not my greatest strength. So they're super specialized and they come with limitations. We can use them for these specific tasks, but we can't really improvise with these ropes. Okay. So the big advantage of the Rad Kit and these lightweight rope kits are, they're obviously super light. 6mm piece of cord versus 8mm or 9 or 10mm climbing rope. It's obviously way lighter. The whole kit that Petzl sells together weighs just over a kilogram, so super light. This piece of rope here, this is like 660 grams. Hardly even feel it in your backpack. So I mean, every day and every year, as time goes on, I'm just like continuously trying to reduce the weight in my backpack. So this has been a huge advantage for me and for all of us out there. That being said, some of those objectives that, maybe you're like just going across a little tiny glacier and you're like, geez, yeah, I don't really want to carry a rope. Well, if it's only 1 kilogram and you can throw that in and hardly even notice it. So that being said, you're just more likely to carry one of these lightweight rope kits. So kind of one of the advantages there. I think I don't have the whole kit here, but I can show you later kind of what I carry as part of my crevasse rescue, my full kit. All right, moving on. The disadvantages of the lightweight rope kits and the Rad Line. You know, you can see there's obviously way more disadvantages than there are advantages. You know, these guys, this gear, it's super specialized. You know, I spent an entire day with a bunch of mountain guides going through and learning what we can and can't do with these ropes. You know, I was blown away. Super informative. I mean, I only have 20 minutes to talk to you guys about it, but I just recommend, you know, taking a full course or you know, just practicing with your kits if that's what you're going to use when you're out on a glacier. So they're super specialized, and like I was previously saying, they require a whole bunch of special tools to take with you. You know, you can't just go out there with a couple of pieces of Prusik and a couple of locking carabiners and hope that you're going to get somebody out of a crevasse with one of these things. It's just not going to work. They're low stretch, so they're basically a static cord. And so what that means is if you're traveling on a glacier with one of these cords and somebody falls into a crevasse, the rope isn't going to absorb any of the force of that fall. That force is all going to be transferred onto the climbers, those people that are tied into the rope with you. So it's going to pull you off your feet. It's going to probably knock you down and drag you along the snow for a little bit. And you know, hopefully you're well rehearsed in your crevasse rescue, and you can stop that fall. So low stretch means it's going to be hard to hold the fall. I mean, there are some other parts of the equation that will absorb some of that force in the fall. As this skinny little rope cuts through the bridge of or the roof of a snow bridge, then that's going to absorb a whole bunch of the force as well. That's kind of what we're counting on. Definitely recommend, you know, putting knots in your rope when you're using one of these for glacier travel. These ropes, they have limited use, so they can't be used for climbing. Like if all of a sudden you're cruising through the mountains and you're like, oh shit, well, I'm gonna need a belay for this little rock step here or something, or I wasn't expecting this. It's like, you know, taking a lead fall on one of these ropes. It's like it's gonna create and transfer so much force into you and your belayer that you're just gonna wreck yourself. I'll talk a little bit more about that in some upcoming slides here. Yeah, so they're easy. It's easy to shock load a system or shock load an anchor. They're also really expensive. It's I can't remember the exact price. I think the whole kit costs about $500 at MEC. Yeah, so they're expensive and they wear out. You know, if you're using it a lot, if it's exposed to the sun a lot, then yeah, it's going to break down. It's going to not last as long. Okay, moving on here. Yeah, I started to talk a little bit on my last slide about some forces here. So my main takeaway from you know, my full day working with these ropes was how easy it is to create like critical forces in a system. So the little picture beside the graph here, it's trying to explain the forces that are created and how that fall factor of 0.4. So if an 80 kilogram person falls only 80 centimeters, free falls 80 centimeters with 2 meters of rope out, then they're going to create a fall factor of 0.4. So not a big fall factor. It's actually really easy to create those forces. And what that translates to is creating an impact force of up to 6.5 kilonewtons. I'm not going to go into what a kilonewton is here in this short period of time, but to put it all into perspective, what we're saying here is, if you're building an anchor, a T-slot anchor out of something like an ice axe, if you built a T-slot anchor out of an ice axe, you built it with superb craftsmanship and the direction of pull, everything was bang on. That axe, or that ice axe T-slot anchor, that will break somewhere around 3 kilonewtons of force. So just trying to put into perspective how easy it is to create forces that could potentially create an anchor to fail. So you can imagine, if you're pulling somebody out of a crevasse and maybe they're like helping you out, maybe they're like trying to climb up the crevasse, or they're pulling on the rope and then their hands slip off of it and they fall like 80 centimeters onto this low stretch rope. You're creating impact forces of 6.5 kilonewtons, and it's a high likelihood that your anchor may not hold those forces. So what can you do in that sort of situation? If you're the rescuer, you can back your anchor up, you can create another anchor. If you're just building an anchor out of a single ice axe, then you should be definitely thinking about backing up that anchor. What else? What else about forces here? So these, the sheath, these ropes, they're a combination of nylon, aramid, and Dyneema. It's how they create such a strong piece of cord in such a small diameter. But what Petzl found in their testing is that with this toothed device here, that this sheath can still get ripped off at just over 5 kilonewtons of force. So when we talk about an 80 centimeter fall, then we're talking about impact forces of 6.5 kilonewtons. We're getting up there around the range of potentially ripping the sheath off of this skinny little rope. So those are some of the limitations in the whole system here, and these are awesome, and I fully endorse the system, but it's super important that we know the limitations and we know how easy it is to overload it and put ourselves in a harmful situation. This little guy, this Tiblock, what Petzl came up with was a potential for ripping the sheath off at 4 kilonewtons of force. So that being said, like when you're using this as a rope grab and you're cranking somebody, maybe you got a couple of people that are really cranking on the rope trying to get someone out of a crevasse, then 4 people could definitely start to create those forces that could wreck the rope and wreck the sheath and put yourselves in a pretty shitty situation. What time is it? Okay, 5 more minutes here. So what I'm trying to get at here with all this talk on impact forces is we just have we're operating with these really tight margins in a rescue situation, which is really could be a pretty it's a potentially hazardous situation, right? And we definitely don't want to be making these things worse. So moving on here. Yeah, so the takeaways that I've come up with through my my years of practice and carrying these ropes around and instructing people on how to use these things properly are, to be really clear on, you need to be really clear on the limitations of the tools you're carrying around. So if you think that, you're going to have to do some rock climbing, or you're going to be belaying somebody or giving a lead belay, then this is it's definitely not the tool to be using, and you should think about actually carrying that full strength rope out there in the mountains with you. Another takeaway, you absolutely positively need to have the right tools with you in order to use one of these lightweight ropes properly, and in order to be able to get somebody out of a crevasse. There's just very little that you can do to improvise with these things. So make sure you got these, and make sure everybody in your group's got one. It doesn't help if you're carrying the rope and somebody else is carrying the micro traction, and like they go into the crevasse with the micro traction. These things, I teach a ton of crevasse rescue courses, and I used to tell people this is a pretty specialized piece of equipment, and now I just recommend that everybody buys one. If you're going to be moving around on a glacier, it's just worth it. They cost somewhere around $100, and they're useful in lots of applications, not just in crevasse rescue. In rope ascension, they're super useful. In rock climbing, rope rescue, incredibly useful. They just make everything a lot easier. And then you need to know the techniques, right? So, Ross just talked about a whole bunch of knots. You got to know those knots and know what knots are going to be appropriate to be using with these lightweight kits. Like the recommended knot to tie into a carabiner here, the barrel knot. It's simple, but you just need to know it and practice it. So, this low stretch, like I was saying, like just as a takeaway, the low stretch means it's really easy to create high forces, and those forces can be transferred to the person that's falling into the crevasse, the person that's being rescued from the crevasse, and the anchor that you're doing your rescue from. Yeah, so I've got my last slide here. There's some online resources. There's so much stuff out there. Petzl is amazing with sharing all their tests. They have a whole manual on how to use this thing, and they've got some cool videos out there on how to use it in crevasse rescue, what its best uses are, and there's a quick video there on how to set up a rappel with it. Yeah, they're awesome. I'll take these resources and I'll put them into the chat here as soon as I learn how to do that. But in the meantime, I will I'll just open the floor for some questions here. Yeah, anybody got any questions on this stuff? Can you raise your hands? Raise your hands if you have any questions. Okay, you can also ask questions in the question. Oh, look, there's questions and answers. Does the 5mm Prusik actually grab on the 6mm cord? Should you use a smaller diameter Prusik? You know, that's a great question. It does. It will grab onto the 6mm cord. I have tested it out. It depends a little bit on you know, whether your rope is icy or wet. If it's icy or wet, you might just have to give it another wrap. But yeah, I found that the 5mm works really well.
Looks like Michael here's got a question. I think.
Michael, what's your question?
We were wondering if the micro traction is actually rated for the Rad Line. I have one in my hand that says 8 to 11mm. The Rad Line is 6. Is that just because it's specific for the Rad Line, or
is there a special micro traction for the Rad Line?
No, that's an awesome question, Michael. Thanks for bringing that up. You know, Petzl would, when they created the micro traction, they didn't intend for it to be used with such a thin line here. But then what they did is they went out and did a whole bunch of tests, like thousands of tests with the Rad Line and the micro traction. And what they came up with was, yes, it actually can be used with the micro traction can be used with the Rad Line, and they do endorse that they be used together. I mean, that being said, they don't endorse that the micro traction be used with other static cords like the Sterling rope that they've created. They did like super interesting reads on their website about, and some great graphing. You know, they tested all of the different cords out there, and some of them were breaking at as little as 1.7 kilonewtons of force. So, you know, if we talk about an 80-centimeter fall on one of these lines creating 6.5, it sure as heck doesn't take much to create yeah, that 1.7 kilonewtons of force. So I'd have to recommend that, you know, if you're going to be using a Rad Line, you're using the right tools with that equipment. And no, I don't work for Petzl, but I do like the products. Yeah, does that answer your question there, Michael?
It does.
yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. I see another question here. What happens in case of sheath failure? Would the person completely fall or still be held by something? Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, unfortunately, I don't have the answer to that. If anybody else in the audience does have the answer, then and could speak up and speak to it, then I'd love to know. I know with a fully rated rope, when the sheath fails, then the core is where the strength of the rope. So typically, catastrophic failure won't happen. But you know, I've never witnessed it with one of these. I haven't witnessed a sheath failure, but I do know that it's going to have it's going to have a worse effect because the sheath is, you know, the Dyneema is woven into the sheath of this guy, and some of the strength in the rope does come from the sheath. So, you know, I'll look into that. It's something I should know. Thanks for the question, Nick. Anonymous says, how many rescues have you been a part of? 2. Yeah, I've been a part of 2 rescues. Neither one of them were using one of these lightweight lines. My first rescue was just me and one other person on a traverse, Great Divide traverse. We were a long ways away from anywhere, and we were using one of the old Beal Rando ropes. So it was slightly thicker than this, and it was dynamic, and it cut so far into the bridge of the crevasse that it was like, it held an incredible amount of the energy, absorbed tons of the energy, and then all the stretch. You know, I was like quite green in my mountain experience at that point, and really keen to learn. But yeah, I feel like in that situation, there was a lot of things that went well for us, and we got pretty lucky. The other rescue that I was a part of, you know, I witnessed in Chamonix a bunch of years ago, and it was, you know, the pros were had been lowered out of a helicopter and were already involved, and my ski partner and I, we approached them and just helped them pad the lip of the crevasse and pull the person in. And you know, everything worked out okay. We had like a 11 mil static line to do that rescue with. Another question here: what kind of knot do you prefer to use on glacier travel to slow a fall? Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I just use a simple overhand on a bite here. It works. It's simple, and it takes up it doesn't take up that much rope. Doesn't use a ton of rope. I guess the other thing to point out, one of the big takeaways that I had using these lines is, you know, this barrel knot that you can see here. If you're tied into the line with the barrel knot, or any knot for that matter, even a figure eight, if you're gonna fall, if you're like falling into, if you're shock loading one of these ropes, they're basically a one-time use rope, because you're never gonna get that knot out. Okay, what happens in case of sheath failure? Got that one. The Rad Kit is 30 meters if traveling with 3 people. Should you opt for a 60 meter? When do you recommend a 30 meter over a 60 meter and vice versa? I would recommend just multiple 30 meter lines. Yeah, kind of like recreationally and professionally. I always try and have 2 of these kits in the party. You know, I carry one in my bag, and then hopefully somebody that's skiing at the back of a group would have one in their bag. So, you know, I bring 2, hand one out to my to one of my strongest guests that has the most amount of experience, and you know, just teach them how to use it. Right on. Any more questions there? I think we're running low on time here. Okay, well, I'll wrap it up on that note. Yeah, we got Ruben's coming up next with the presentation. It should be awesome. Hang in there. And thanks for hanging out, everybody. Cheers. Want to take her over there, Ross?
Yeah, sweet. Thanks, man. That was great.
Thanks.
Well, yeah. Thanks so much, Jeff, and thanks, Danny, for staying up late there in Chamonix and sharing some knowledge with us. And yeah, just kind of keep an eye out there in the chat too. Jeff can share those links, and I also shared their Jeff's and Danny's Instagram profile if you want to follow them and harass them online in the future.
Oh yeah, awesome. And yeah, if you have any more questions, let me know. You can hit me up on Instagram. I'm happy to do that.
Sweet. So yeah, next up we have the infamous Chris Rubens. I was just asking him how I should introduce him, and you know, I think for me the biggest summarize of Chris is the better of all the skiers that he's often skiing with. He's often seen with Hoji and Abma, and so it's nice that we finally have the good skier of them all. Also, you know, Chris is a big inspiration and also a leader in environmentally conscious recreating and living, and so I think that is also going to be really interesting to hear his take on all that. So please, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. You got me here. This is working.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so this is my first Zoom thing, so this is exciting for me. But yeah, big thanks for Ross for putting this on, and Altus Guides, and everybody that's tuning in. This is pretty awesome. Super fun to be able to do stuff like this. I really enjoyed listening to everybody yesterday. But yeah, hopefully everybody is out enjoying some sunshine today. And yeah, I'll get into my presentation here. I think I have figured out how you do this all. Yeah, I think that is the gist of it there. You guys can see my screen, hopefully. So this presentation is, I did it for POW, Protect Our Winters Canada, in the fall here. And through talking about the environment and doing changes of my own, I found out that we've done like this pretty incredible job of like really taking power away from individuals, I think. You know, we go and talk at these schools and it just really felt to me like people thought it was out of their control. And I think with this current coronavirus, it's super interesting. It's like never been so more prevalent how big of a difference an individual could make. So I found this on the internet. Whoever said no person can't change the world never ate an undercooked bat, which is obviously false news, but I thought it was pretty funny. It's a very like funny thing for right now. And just the way the world is right now, it's like very much like an individual can make a huge difference right now. So it's really important to stay at home and do these cool things like the Zoom meeting here, or do whatever you can. So yeah, I grew up, some people know this, some people don't, but I was actually born in Australia. That's my mom and dad and myself. I thought I was Superman at a very early age, I guess, and was always clambering around. And then when I was about 5, I moved to Calgary and moved to the mountains. That's Jasper down there. That's sunshine, taking air. And my parents were always very good at getting us out in the mountains and showing us nature and helping us appreciate, you know, we lived in the city, but every weekend we were off out in the mountains and really appreciating nature. So I have my parents to definitely thank for that. And they're always very respectful. That's me and my sister. My sister is a former World Cup ski racer, went to the Olympics a couple times. And my parents are actually from Britain. And so when we moved to Canada, skiing and ski racing was like this very, they had no idea what it was. And of course I got right into it and brought my sister into it. That's for the ski racers out there, it's Johnny Kuchera and Francois Bork on the podium, and myself with some blonde hair. And then ski racing just like didn't really work out for me. It was, for whatever reason. And so I joined the Rocky Mountain Freeriders. And on the far left, there's Kevin Yurtis. There's me with like a gross goatee, and Guy Mowbray, who started it. And so this was me I was one of the students at the start, and this had a huge influence on me. It was this like, just like doing something super similar, but doing it a bit different, and like having that same feeling of like being together in a group and like really enjoying ourselves. And so when I graduated, so that was like the year before I graduated high school, and I graduated high school, I moved straight out to Canmore, started shooting photos. These are Ryan Curry photos. Was shooting photos like every opportunity I had. And the one down on the far right is actually the very first photo I ever got published. And just kind of started building my name up. That's Eric Horlifson, like one of my best friends on a cat ski trip in the early days. I showed that, just the, good memories. And this is the very first day we bought snowmobiles. So that's my snowmobile. It's an old 600 at the bottom of Boulder in Revelstoke. That's Eric, first day on his sled, which ended up in this very quickly. An old 670, and we really had like quite the learning curve that went along with learning how to snowmobile back in the day. They are not what they are today, but for me this was like a huge deal. The snowmobile was my entrance into the Matchstick films. I didn't have big budget to film with out of helicopters, and so the snowmobile was like really like my investment in getting into these films, and for me personally, it really paid off. So it's like a really interesting part. Like everyone says, snowmobiles are such a bad investment, but somehow for me, it really did work. But so that's like kind of my entrance in, and then all of a sudden, things went really well for me. Things were growing, and I was getting to travel around the world. The first picture is me and Mark Abma in Argentina, or Chile, sorry, and then that's Morocco. That's signing posters for Into the Mine with JP Auclair and crew. Photo of Matthias's from Switzerland, I believe. Japan, yeah, kind of like all over the world. Iceland with Andreas, New Zealand, and things started getting better. Started getting on the cover of magazines. That's like one of the favorite photos of all time, the eclipse with Ruben Krabby there. And so yeah, things are going well. It's like I'm making a living skiing and kind of have this like opportunity where I can travel wherever I want, kind of do whatever I want, and not really thinking too much about the environment at this point, and really just stoked on the ski aspect of things. And that's super great. I know about climate change, but like to me, it's just like too big of a thing to like really handle. And then so here comes along Guilt Trip, and so this was like a big like turning point for me. So we went to Greenland. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but it's on the Solomon TV YouTube channel. And so we go to Greenland, and we brought a climate scientist with us, and we did some work and the whole thing. Well, let's try and play this video. We'll see. So far, videos haven't worked very good, but it's just kind of a short clip here. And I think Alan, the scientist, really sums it up perfectly.
Why do you think we invited you on this trip?
Because from what I understand of what you do, you're a sort of globe-trotting bunch of privileged but talented skiers who've probably got a bit of a guilty conscience about the amount of air miles and carbon footprint or something.
For me personally, like I mean, I'd be lying if the bottom line isn't the skiing. I mean, the opportunity to come and see a place that very few people see, I mean, that's an opportunity that is really hard to say no to.
Yeah, so hopefully that worked for you guys. But so the interesting thing about that for me was we went on this incredible trip, and I think the start of that really paints the picture perfectly. You know, it's like, hey, we have this guilt and we don't really know what to do about it, and so we go on this trip, and for me at this point, it's still about the skiing. I'm like, look at this incredible adventure we went on, and it was amazing. But the big changing point for me was we took it on tour. And so we went to Toronto, we went to New York, and we met these people there that really didn't spend a lot of time in the backcountry, and they really couldn't believe that we were seeing these effects of climate change, and they were asking us what we were doing about it. And so you're standing on stage, and we knew this was going to happen, but you kind of you said a couple things, but really at that point, all we were really doing was like, well, we made this movie, you know, and so that fall, it really went down this rabbit hole. And if anybody has been down the rabbit hole of environmentalism, which I think a lot of people have at this point, it can be like a deep, dark hole that's kind of hard to get out of. And a lot of times you're like, hey, let's like run for the mountains. I'm like going to stop traveling, going to stop it all. You know, like I'm so bad for this world. And so, you know, that's like one feeling, but then you're like, okay, no, let's like bring it back to like a more realistic side of it. And like, what can I do? What can I change to make this happen? And so for me, a big one, it was pretty obvious, like when you start diving into it. And for me, it was travel. At that point, it was like 27 flights around the world, like racking up the air miles. And so it was like, okay, like let's tone that back a bit. Like where do I need to be? Where do I not need to be? And just by looking at that, like now I'm really down to about 2 a year. I go to France for some Solomon meetings every year, which is a great time, need to be there. And then if there's like one big, amazing trip that comes up, that's really hard to say no to, I feel like I can justify that to myself. But no more is it like this needless, like, okay, I'm just going to fly there for the sake of flying there. And like that being said, I have had the privilege to travel a lot of these places. So that's just my own thing. And then the next one is like big and simple, and it's been talked about a lot. It was changing the diet, and I was like a total meat eater before. I kind of was like one of those guys that didn't really think that like a meal was food without the meat there. And so I've changed my diet. I'm pretty much 100% vegetarian now if I have the choice. And it's been really interesting for me is it's really come down to like now I just prefer to eat that way. I have really enjoyed that side. It's been like a nice side effect of it all. At the start, I was like, oh, this is going to be really hard, and turned out to be super easy and really enjoyable. And then the biggest thing for someone like myself was like using my voice. I think that we've invested a huge amount of time creating this image for ourselves. So like let's use it to say something important. So that's Greg Hill and I chatting at Mac. I guess that was 2 calls ago when we launched PAL Canada. And so, yeah, I really love the PAL side of things. That's been like a super, super fun organization to work with. And I'll get to a bit more of that later. And then the other thing we did is we wanted like kind of a follow-up for Guilt Trip of like where we've gone now. And so we decided we were going to go on this like epic ski tour. We started talking about it kind of like mid-season, and we were going to do the Southern Monashees. We were going to start from our houses and then ski back to our houses, and we were going to bag all of these peaks along the way. And we had like we had these attack bags. And like we were gonna have like our big bags on top, and then we'd have our Avi gear and our attack bags, and we'd like be ski touring along and be like, "Look at that line, we're gonna attack!" And yeah, that didn't really happen. Greg got really sick right at the start. He had severe diarrhea and very low energy, and most people would have quit, but he is probably the most stubborn human that I know of. And so we continued, but the weather sucked, and nothing seemed to go our way, and it was quite honestly not the most enjoyable trip. But then that same spring, like after that, he had this idea, and he had bought an electric car, but the electric car wasn't here. And he really wanted to go and do this electric road trip down to the States and do all the volcanoes electrically. And so this was done. This is done in a Nissan Leaf, which at the time had like 150 kilometer range. So really, like we started the trip with like, this is the idea. We have no idea if it'll work. And so we just kind of started it with like, we had the time and we're like, okay, this like might last a week or this might last 2 weeks. It really depends if this is stupid or not. And so we just went for it, and it turned out it totally worked. It was like unbelievable amounts of fun. Neither of us had ever really done the volcanoes before, but just like a little bit more like we were doing the same adventures, and like you just had to do a little bit more thinking, a little bit like, okay, how far is it to the next charger? How can we plan our day around that? And just like taking all the skills that we've learned in the mountains and how we operate in the mountains, and then applying that to the drive up. And I mean, now with the electric cars, you don't need half the amount of planning we had for those trips. Like that trip was very silly, but very fun at the same time. So where I'm at now, so that, I mean, that whole section there, that got made into a a movie called Curve of Time, which is also on the Solomon Channel, which I really enjoyed. Jordan Manley made it, and it's like really artsy. One of the kind of the cooler like journeys of what we went through. So those of you who know me, I have like a huge F350 truck diesel, and I still have my snowmobiles that we went back to the beginning, and I did this trip this summer to Greenland and came back from it and was like, I'm selling it all. I'm done. Like, I'm buying an electric vehicle. And once again, like, talk myself down on that. And I've been talking about going veggie oil forever. And so I finally veggie oiled the truck. And I'm super psyched on this. Basically it's a 2-tank system. And it takes the veggie oil, recycled veggie oil. So I've been getting it from our local ski resort here, RMR, and some of the local restaurants in town. I put it in the tank, and then I can run veggie oil. And so the big thing about that is it really cuts down on the harmful nitrous oxides and stuff like that, the particulates that diesel puts out. So it's not a perfect solution for everybody by any means. I'm pretty psyched. Like, to be totally honest, I love my big stupid truck with stupid mud wheels on it for like no reason other than the looks or whatever. I mean, I do like to use my truck for being a truck, but having that running on veggie has been like a huge success for me, and I've really enjoyed that process. Got it done on Vancouver Island. Dr. Bjorn, highly recommend him. That was a really good experience. And then back to POW. So this is chatting in Edmonton in the fall. I was there with Kate Edgar, and this is talking to 700 plus students. I think we talked to over 3,000 students this day, and they all, like, this kind of goes back to like the fact of like empowering people. And so the cool thing, and what I'm about to do here is we are calling the member of parliament. And so you get up there and you talk to the kids, and you get them all psyched, and you're like, hey, do you think your like member of parliament would care what you think? And of course they're like, no. And you're like, well, I do. And so you call them up, and sometimes we'd get their secretary, sometimes we get a speakerphone. This is right before the elections, and it was really cool. Like, they're kind of chatting the whole time and whispering, and then as soon as you hear the phone ring, they just like kind of can't believe that you're actually calling the member of parliament. And you could even like look around at the teachers and stuff, and they were like super surprised that you're actually doing it. But I think to me, like, that's the point of this, is that as an individual, you can really collectively use your voice here. The other thing I'm doing is ride sharing on the snowmobiles. Kind of a funny photo, but yeah, to be honest, like, I very rarely go just snowmobiling anymore. Right now, I pretty much like will use it to access to go ski touring, or more recently I bought a big tent that has a wood stove in it, and so instead of sledding into a zone for like a week straight to film or whatever, we just sled in once, set up camp, and then just hang out there for the week, and the snowmobiles just kind of sit there. Yes, we're still using them, but we're using a whole lot less gas than we used to. And yeah, that's Mark Abma, just enjoying the pure bliss of walking around the mountains with nobody around, and using less fossil fuels to do it. So yeah, I got a few do's and don'ts here. Do, reduce, reuse, recycle. There's another one there now called refuse. This is surprising to me, and this is a little bit different with coronavirus now, but I see so many people still not using water bottles and to-go cups. It's like, it's a very simple thing to do, but very, very easy. And there's still tons of people that aren't doing it, and that makes a huge difference. Eat more sustainably. So, I mean, I don't think everybody needs to be a vegetarian. We don't need these like extremes, like just, Greg and his family, they do weekday veg. I know a lot of people in Revelstoke have really like come on board with that, of like, okay, these days I eat vegetarian and these days I eat meat, and whatever it is, I think we just need to like cut down on that sort of thing. This is a big one, and right now, like, what we're dealing with the economy, and lots of people have lost jobs and stuff like that, is challenge yourself to less food. It's going to be better for your book. And we still waste like up to 40% of our food in North America. So that's a huge, huge thing. And we spend a lot of energy making our food. If you are making changes, don't hate on the people that aren't. I think we just kind of need everybody on the same side. I feel like we are in such a polarized environment these days, especially when you get into politics and stuff like that. Like, just because somebody else isn't making the changes that you are doesn't mean that, like, you don't know what's going on in their life. So just making everything more positive. And then on the same token, when you see people making changes, be stoked that they're making changes. Are they going to be perfect? Like, I still use fossil fuels. I am not, like, the truck, it's still using diesel. It's not perfect. So we have a saying at POW, progress over perfection. And the same goes with the, like, electric cars. Are they perfect right now? Not even close. You know, there's tons of problems with lithium and the battery side of it, but it's the path we need to go down to get better. And that's the really important thing to see there, I think. Walk or bike more, super simple. Be empowered as an individual. Individuals have as much amount of influence on this world and is never more obvious than right now. So to me, like with the coronavirus, I think that's a really, not that there's much positive going on with the coronavirus. I think that is like a real positive thing. It just shows how important like individuals are and individuals' actions. What we can do, so we'd love people to join POW. It's free membership, strength in numbers. So that gives the outdoor industry like a voice when it comes to Parliament. I think that'll become increasingly important. Educate yourself. I think that's like the most fun that I've had about this, especially like talking to the kids and stuff like that, is like if I'm going out there and like I can talk about skiing all day long and it's fairly easy for me. But to talk about a way more convoluted issue of climate change, like I really had to educate myself and go down these different paths, and that's been really fun. Like I love learning and love challenging myself and that sort of thing. Influence with your wallet. This is huge. You know, it's like they say voting with your wallet, but if we continue to buy plastic water bottles for one-use plastic, they're going to continue to make them. If we stop making them, they'll make us something else. But hopefully that's more environmentally friendly. They're just like looking for the dollars. So voting's a big one. This kind of came out in last year's election time, and I think overall for our purposes, it went really well. When we get back to school and stuff like that, Hot Planet Cool Athletes, that's a thing, and you can get in touch with the POW guys and request that at your school. They're really fun presentations, and I think the kids get a lot out of them. Make changes, and no change is too small. I think this is a big one, because as soon as you start making a change, all of a sudden you take something like climate change, which is this like really negative thing with a lot of negative connotations coming along with it. As soon as you make a change that's positive, no matter how small it is, maybe it's like changing all your lights to LED bulbs, all of a sudden you have like a positive spin, and that feels good about climate change, and it makes it more of a positive thing. And you're like, okay, what else can I change? So much of the time when we get into these things, it's like, you know, if you're standing at the bottom of a mountain and you want to go ski touring for the day, and you're like, holy cow, there's no way I'm going to get to the top of the thing. Like, how big is it? But when you really break it down into those sections, the smaller sections, like, okay, well, let's go to there and we'll have a snack and see how we feel. And then, you know, all of a sudden, a couple hours later, you're at the top of that mountain. But, you know, it's breaking it down that really makes it more surmountable. Don't be afraid to be a hypocrite. I think that's a big one. Like, so many people are scared to take that first real step into changing their lifestyles because they're scared to be called a hypocrite. And we live in a fossil fuel based society, so it's okay to be a hypocrite. And we're all hypocrites. That's just something we have to get over and move on with. Yeah, in the future there might be some tough choices about how we live, but right now we're just trying to get the majority agree on the major issue of climate change. So once we agree on it, then we can figure out how best to tackle it, but we're still trying to agree on that part. Yeah, and we need all of you. Like I keep going back to, it's like it's more obvious than ever right now that individuals do matter and that you can make a big difference. So we need everybody to really take that on and make this stuff a priority. That's just the Protect Our Winners. They have some really awesome, the Protect Our Winners Canada stuff have some really awesome stuff on their website about little things you can and can't do to help out. But the biggest thing right now is to sign up. Yeah, so that's it. I think maybe I'll try and answer some questions if anybody has any questions or anything like that. Got like a minute or so. What brand of tent with the wood stove? Yeah, that tent is sick. It's a Cabela's tent. It's an outfitter's tent, and I definitely highly recommend it. I've spent a lot of time in the base camp situation, and so I'm super stoked on it. I've got it for 2 years now, and highly recommend it. Right on. Well, I think, oh, here we go. Here's a bunch. What sorts of costs associated with converting the engine over to veggie oil? So I think you could do it cheaper. By the time I'm said and done, I'm into it for about $6,000. And that includes my filtering system at home. And that was done by Dr. Bjorn on the island, and I've had no problems whatsoever with it. So I'm pretty stoked. Like a lot of people have definitely had a lot of problems just within the actual system. And so I haven't had any problems with that. So that's been really fun. And then it basically comes down to like how good your veggie oil is. So you, Abma would tell me this, because Abma's been doing this for like 10 years in his truck, and he was like, you'll find out very quickly like which restaurants you want to eat at and not, because you find out how much they clean their oil. And so we got a super good source at the Revelstoke Mountain Resort, and their oil's been really awesome. And so yeah, so far it's been pretty smooth sailing, you know, not too many disasters yet. And yeah, it's pretty fun like cruising along in a huge truck running on veggie oil. The very first time I did it, I have to tell the story, I was actually with Izzy Lynch driving home from a POW meeting, and I just got it done, and I was so scared to press the button that like switches it over to veggie oil. And I finally did it, and you're like going along, like all this anticipation coming along, you press the button and like literally nothing happens. It like just keeps coasting. You're like, oh, of course. Like, yeah. What activities are you taking part in the quarantine? So what I've been doing, we've kind of like, I've been hanging out with Greg a bunch and my girlfriend Cece, and we've been like pretty fired up on growing food. Not totally sure on where the world's going right now, and so that's kind of the avenue that we're going down. We're like super stoked on getting the seeds started. We've been building some greenhouses, and yeah, haven't been missing it too much, or at least this, like I'm making myself not miss it too much. But yeah, that's been like a good thing to like keep our energy going. Yeah, thank you guys. I think Leanne and Douglas are up next. Pretty stoked to check those guys out. And yeah, I think we'll hand it over to Ross here. Thanks for watching.
Sweet. Thanks, Chris. That was awesome.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
I'm so jealous of your truck. I hope one day I have a giant veggie oil truck. Yeah, that was great. Leanne, are you on here? Yes, our next president is Leanne Pelosi, who is a snowboarder here in Whistler, and kind of a general badass from doing big mountain tricks to making movies of her own or filming with the Sherpas. So really, really cool to have her on board here.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Great job, Rubens. That was sick. I caught the last little bit as I was trying to finish my presentation here. But yeah, I wanted to, I guess I should share my little, I can't share the screen while the other participant is sharing. Rubens.
Chris, you got to turn your screen share off.
How do I do that? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so I have a little presentation. And I'm going to talk about human factors in avalanche terrain. So, can you guys see my presentation, or I haven't shared it yet? Oh, I'm not entirely sure. Sorry, this is my first time doing this. But yeah, so basically, can I get a confirmation that people can see the presentation? How do I see the chat?
You're good.
Yeah, and see, okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm Leanne, I'm from Whistler, and I wanted to highlight on my experiences riding powder in the backcountry, specifically the human factors in avalanche terrain. And last year I was able to have the opportunity to film with the Sherpa Cinema, and North Face produced this epic film called Defiance with Victor Delarue and Jake Lavelt, two of the heavy hitters in the backcountry. And for those of you guys haven't seen it, it's a high energy, action-packed film. And there's a segment in there with a few avalanches too. And Victor got into one and then I got into the other. So I just kind of wanted to share my experience going through that and what went through my head and my crew's head. But I feel like Dave Mossip and Mike Burton, who were in charge of the film, did a great job of just like making it feel as eerie as it did in real life. It was really crazy watching it and feeling spooked out exactly the same like how I felt like when I was in the avalanche. And we actually had a debate about keeping the avalanches in the film or not in the film. And we decided that it was kind of a good call to showcase the reality of the risk riding in big mountain terrain. Yeah, so the truth is there's no way to truly eliminate all the risk in the mountains, but we can make best judgment calls that we can to avoid that risk. So I want to just share my personal thoughts around the whole situation. But so this photo right here is a photo of a northeast facing slope. We had two-week opportunities to film. In the first 2 weeks, we actually kind of got skunked. So this is the first portion of the second week. Day one, we get to this dope-looking face, and we all do a lap on it. It was awesome. Checked the avalanche forecast in the morning, and it was rated as moderate. And there was a chance for storm sliding. So with that in mind, I tried to choose something that was moderate in my head, a line that just fanned out. And if you just look at the main face where the wide open bowl is on the right hand side, that's kind of where I decided to go. Second run, I hit this little spine and the whole thing popped. I've got a little video here. So I'm, as you can see, super confident. I think I had a false sense of confidence after run one where I didn't really put much pressure on the face. So this is my run two, ollie off this little nose. Almost kind of lost it there. But then from the peripheral of my vision, I was just like, oh my God, I'm totally screwed. And then I was like, okay, no more negative thoughts. I instantly switched into like full on aggressive flow state, and everything became crystal clear. And I had remembered that my out was 45 degrees. I had an airbag. I didn't pull it because I was still going. But I just tried to go, and it was really hectic. There was some stotch walls that's the end of the avalanche, and they were turning into like these jump kind of feelings. I basically went airborne from this moment right here, and then right there I kind of lost it, but I didn't lose it, so that was good. But yeah, it was super scary, and yeah, I was full of adrenaline, and I was very glad to make it out. But I think the takeaway from getting into this avalanche was that I underestimated the power of a 20 to 45 centimeter storm slab. And I'm grateful that I had chosen something that fanned out. And because if I didn't land that off that spine, I could have been very well caught in the middle of it. And then I could have gone over some exposure, which wouldn't have been good. But yeah, so my risk tolerance for the day for this particular scene was that I was going to ride something that didn't have any exposure. So that happened. That was my first day filming with the guys in the good conditions with the storm slab problem. And moving forward, so yeah, this is just me in a couple images that Blake Jorgensen shot right in the middle. Oh yeah, and then this is the face that happened. So you could see where it released and then where I went, and I made it to the left there underneath the rocks. But yeah, fast forward a couple days after that, we get to this sick face in Pemby, and I don't know if it was in my head, but I was dealing with some like PTSD, and I didn't feel that this zone was a location that I wanted to really get on first thing in the morning. Again, if you look closely, there's a couple old crowns, and they were probably pretty recent with some holes underneath. And so I decided that I was going to step back and not ride and just watch the guys ride and see. I just couldn't decipher if it was like my head being like, oh, you know, like I was just a little bit of a head case getting into that Abbey, and I couldn't decide if it was like a real risk or what the situation was. So anyways, the guys rode this first line. Jake rides it. This is just with my iPhone. And I'm standing at the barbecue angle watching them. I'm like, okay, doesn't look too bad. That was sick. Nothing moves at all. And then they point out this line for me to do. And I just highlighted that in red. And my concern was that it was just right next to the line that the boys had ridden, and it was a lot longer, and it had a bunch of exposure at the bottom. So for that reason, I told the filmers I didn't want to ride that line because of those reasons. And I get back into the heli, go to the top with Jake and Victor, and they could tell that I was a little tense since I skipped out on the first run. And Victor was like, hey, are you going to ride that line? And I was like, no, go for it. And he ended up riding the line, and this is the front angle. And everything that I had thought was going to happen happened, unfortunately. And I didn't say anything at the top, but I watched from the top. Jake and I were pretty much planning a rescue at that point because we just saw these two powder clouds go off in different directions. And Victor had an airbag on. He pulled his airbag, and somehow he went over all that exposure and came out at the very bottom and was okay. So here, I'll show you. I'll show you guys. I'm just trying to stop the share screen. I'm going to show you Victor's portion, and if I can't manage to share it, I'll just put the link in. Okay, this is my avalanche. And then this is Victor dropping in. He rides it super well. Insane. And then he makes a cut and the Avalanche just takes him right over. So yeah, that was a pretty scary moment. And seeing him come out at the bottom was like the best thing ever. It was super traumatic for me because I just, oh, and then here, this photo right here is Jake and I were at the top and we ended up just riding these mini spines down to Victor to make sure everything was all good. After that, we ended up stepping back and riding smaller slopes. And I was just super happy about that because I just wasn't comfortable in the risk that we were taking as a crew. And yeah, so that happened. What can we learn from this? Well, there's 6 factors in human factors dealing with avalanche terrain: familiarity, acceptance, consistency, expert halo, tracks, and social facilitation. And what I would, I'm going to just kind of go through all of these and reflect on the judgment errors that we had made. But I was super familiar with Whistler, and I knew that we had like a really bad dry spell. So I knew the snow was kind of rotting, and any snow that was going to be depositing on top of that layer was going to be a problem. So I kind of knew that going into this shoot. And when we originally got onto those lines at the beginning, that first face, I was actually pretty nervous. And I did consider, what would I do if I got into an avalanche here? But I wanted to keep up with the Joneses, and I just wanted to like keep up with everybody else. And I would say this is a part of the expert halo. Like, I, being a female on the team, it was my first trip with the North Face. It was my first year with them, and we were filming with the Sherpas. I just didn't want to bail out of something because I wasn't truly listening to what my inner gut was telling me, and it was very scared, and I didn't speak up. Yeah, so there was a lot of things, and also like tracks. It was the second portion of our trip. Like, we only had the 2 weeks with Sherpas, and we kind of really needed to nail it because we got skunked the first week. So there was a lot of exterior pressures involved in why we made the decisions we did. And yeah, I feel like my risk tolerance was definitely less than everybody else on the crew. So that was like a difficult thing to deal with. But ultimately, the biggest takeaway that the silver lining to all of this for me, like getting into these avalanches with this crew, was just to be able to trust yourself and honor your skills and your education. Because as an athlete or a mountain adventurer, don't be afraid to listen to your inner voice and then voice it. Because I could have told Victor my thoughts before he got into that avalanche, and it could have turned out, if he didn't pull his airbag, like guaranteed there's no way that he would have, he would have hurt himself big time for sure. I'm just so shocked that he ended up popping out at the bottom. But yeah, I think riding with people that have a similar risk tolerance as you is also important, because I definitely felt like I was a little bit out of my element with what we were riding at the end of the day. So I want to open it up to a little chat if anybody has any questions. Oh, sorry. Stop share. Q&A. Had you talked about your escape route if something slid on this day before riding. We hadn't, I hadn't seen the face that we were riding the day before. We just showed up to the face. And so what you normally do is you show up, you check it out at a bunch of different angles, maybe do a warm-up lap. In this scenario, I don't think we did a warm-up lap. We just went straight into filming. But I just looked at it and knew if something popped, I kept it to myself. I just knew that it would be underneath the big rock. So yeah, thank you guys. Does anybody have any more questions? No more questions. Oh. What strategies have you figured out to deal with being the only woman? Mountain safety videos. The only women, I feel like that the strategy is to truly honor my own skills. I had taken my Ops 1 and 80-hour first aid, and then I also have 15 years of experience. And I think mentally, I just immediately put myself on the lowest part of the totem pole of the group, and I shouldn't have. And I think moving forward, knowing the decisions and the things that the decisions that I made about not riding that one line that Victor did, it just reinforces that I should be more confident in myself. And so, yeah, I would say my strategy is to make sure that I give myself more confidence in the mountains when I'm with these people that I look up to, because yeah, they may be the best in the world, but at the same time, like, I have just as much experience as them. So I need to honor my confidence. How often do you do AVI training? The beginning of the season, every year I'll do, like, Baldface hosts a professional athlete Avalanche training. So I'll do that every single year if I can. And then this year I did my 80-hour first aid. So, and then also with the crew. But to be honest, we didn't do any like crazy AVI training before the photo shoot. We just kind of came together, and we did have guides on the crew as well that were kind of informing us what the dangers were. So we kind of knew what we were getting into. What sort of assessment goes into skiing versus not skiing a slope? Same assessment goes wherever I go, whether it's filming or not. We're checking the avalanche conditions and talking to local, like if I'm going to a place where I haven't been before, talking to the locals, seeing how the season's set up. Were you guys filming with a supervising guide? Yeah, we had guides. As athletes, are you making slope assessments yourself? Yeah, there were a few times where the guide would say, you know, I wouldn't ride this. If you're willing to accept the risk, then go ahead. But that definitely changed my perception. I was definitely, I was like, well, then get me back in the helicopter. I am good. I don't really want to ride that. But I think for someone like Victor, who has like a super high risk tolerance, he came from the European mountains where they're just like so much bigger. I think Whistler seemed like a little playground to him. So his risk tolerance was a lot higher than the average person. How do you get back into the game mentally? I think because that was my day one of the shoot, I had a really tough time getting back mentally. I was pretty much turned off riding bigger slopes. And as soon as we took it down and eliminated our avalanche risk per se, riding smaller slopes, I gained a huge amount of confidence. And so, yeah, just taking it back to like the first step of riding, just eliminating avalanches altogether. I didn't want to be in any of that terrain. And this year, I definitely feel like the first few times we went out into the backcountry, I was very aware of all of the hazards. So yeah, it left a pretty big impression on my mental state, I guess, when I go into the mountains and try to really respect what is going on with the conditions. But mountain safety videos, maybe Altus Mountain Guides might have some recommendations for that. But yeah, you guys all have great comments here. Thank you so much, everybody. I wish I could see everybody and we could talk, but I guess it's done. Thanks again, Ross, for hosting and everything. This is really cool.
Megan, thanks, Leanne. That was awesome. That was a really cool to hear your take on that event. The movie was awesome. I'll put the link of that movie there in the chat as well. And if you guys haven't seen it, it's a really cool film filmed just north of Whistler last year.
Yeah, Ross, you were there, so if you have anything to add to that conversation.
Yeah. I luckily wasn't there for the avalanches, but it was a tricky year.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Leanne.
Thank you. Thanks for your time, guys.
Right on. Next up is Mike Douglas, who I feel like Mike doesn't need much of an introduction. The man has been around on the ski scene for ages now. Mike's run Switchback Entertainment in Whistler here, and he's the main producer of the Solomon Free Ski films, which Chris was just mentioning in his presentation as well. And so, yeah, super psyched that you're able to join us here, Mike.
Thanks, Ross. Good to be here. And thanks, Leanne and Chris. Those were two super interesting presentations and some good lessons from scary times in the mountains, for sure. Can you guys hear me? Hopefully I'm here. I'm not, I've lost my communication.
Yeah, man, you're on.
Okay, great. Okay. So, well, I'm going to try the screen share thing. Like everybody else, I haven't done it before. So let's give it a go. See if I can get my little presentation going. Let me know if that works. Should say Skiing in Strange Places, Russia 2012. Before I dig into my presentation, I'm going to lighten the mood just a little bit and just and talk about a couple of ski trips that I had to interesting places and sort of the perspective that you gain by traveling and going to interesting places. And in a time like this, in the age of the coronavirus, it's that kind of perspective that helps me keep things in check, I guess, in my own mind. You know, when you start to feel that you're so hard done by or whatever, you realize that there are a lot of people through time that have been dealing with a lot of big challenges. Before I get into that, because I'm just always curious what people are doing, what am I doing? I'm currently here in Whistler, where I live, and I'm sort of locked down in my house like everybody else. I go out for groceries once a week. The interesting part for me is that my family, my wife and my two kids, were overseas in New Zealand visiting my wife's parents when this whole thing blew up. So that added a little kind of wrinkle in our family plans where we had to figure out how to get them back here to Canada in the midst of all this. Fortunately, they did make it back. They got home a week ago, and I had to move into the basement of our house. And so I haven't made contact properly with my family now for a month, but I can see them and talk to them every day now that they're back in Canada. But it's just super weird, and I'm sure everybody's in the same weirdness. We've got another week of them in quarantine, and then finally I'll get to give them big hugs a week from now. So counting down the days. And aside from that, I try to get out for some daily exercise. Fortunately, I live right on the edge of the forest here in Whistler, and whether it's going for a run or just throwing my skins on and going for a ski tour through the forest, I try to get out almost every day and do something. And also, fortunately, being a film producer, we've got a couple of projects in the works right now that need some editing. So that's keeping me busy and should be able to keep me busy for a few more weeks. So hopefully you guys are all doing well as well. All right. I'll get into it here. Yeah, I just want to take you on a couple of trips to interesting places I've got to ski. I am by no means an expert on these places, but these are a couple of trips that really help shape sort of who I am and how I view the world. So skiing in strange places. We're going to start in Russia. So talking about freaky things happening in the world. When I was a kid, I grew up in the Cold War era. So if you're over 40 years old and watching this, then you probably will relate to some of this. But the big fear that I had when I was young was nuclear war. It was a very real threat. And I remember having nightmares as a kid of seeing the mushroom clouds or Soviet paratroopers dropping into my neighborhood or all these scary things. And that was a very real thing back in those days. And the reason was that the arms race between the US and the USSR at the time, and lots of banter back and forth between presidents and threats and all these kinds of scary things going on. And so that sort of hung in the background of my entire childhood through the 70s and 80s. But as I sort of grew as a skier and as I started to experience new places to ski, your bubble you start to look outward into the wider world. And the Caucasus Mountains of southern Russia have been a place that really intrigued me. I'd seen so many cool images and heard stories of people skiing there, particularly in the Krasnaya Polyana area near Sochi. And I really, really wanted to go there. And so I started looking into it pretty seriously around 2010, and finally secured the opportunity to go there. We were planning to go to Krasnaya Polyana in 2012. But there was one problem, and this is something that didn't even cross my mind until we went to book the trip. But with the Sochi Olympics coming up in 2014, the Russian government essentially shut the entire area down for construction. They had to build the Olympics. They were somewhat starting from scratch because there wasn't a lot at Krasnaya Polyana. So skiing at the ski area there was out of the question. So we looked into heli skiing, and when we first inquired, it looked like that would be a possibility. We could go and heli ski the Caucasus Mountains, which sounded really cool. The problem is, as the trip got closer, Putin and the Russian government closed all the airspace around Sochi and effectively shutting down the heli skiing operation there. So once again, I thought that my dreams of skiing in the Caucasus Mountains of Russia were disappearing. But enter this man. This is Jussi Lindblom. He is a Swedish nomadic mountain guide who kind of does tours all over the world. And he called me up one day and said, "Hey, got an option for you. My friend Nikolai Veselovsky, who runs Vertikalny Mir, the heli ski operation that used to operate out of Krasnaya Polyana, has just cut a deal with the Russian government. They're going to give Nikolai one of the Russian government's sort of mountain highways on the other side of the Caucasus Range to operate out of for that winter and the following winter." And I was like, whoa, wait a second. Like, you're telling me that you can go heli ski from a Russian government mansion, secret hideaway in the mountains? Like, this sounds like a James Bond film. I'm like, this sounds like the coolest thing ever. So he said, yeah, I swear it can happen. So we booked the trip. We said, let's go. And to be honest, I didn't really believe it was going to work out, but we decided to go for it. So we made our way to Moscow, made the obligatory stop in Red Square, toured around the city a little bit. I was with Mark Abma, who bore a striking resemblance to Lenin, and was a bit of a hit as we cruised around the subway system. Like you can see the people over here on the left, like kind of like looking at him. I mean, it was kind of like that everywhere, which we had a good laugh over. But a couple days later, we finally made our way to the North Caucasus Mountains to a town called Arkiz. And this is what we found. It actually was real. This is Mikhail Gorbachev's Gostacha. It is probably 100-acre plot of land with a ridiculous pink marble-clad mansion, bulletproof, of course, and absolutely ridiculous in every way. It was everything that you would hope for in a secret hideaway lair of the Russian government, complete with the red phone and the white phone, which were in almost every room. And apparently, the red phone will get you straight to the Kremlin. So pretty darn cool for a kid who grew up in the Cold War. Seeing all this stuff on TV, to be right in the heart of the action was pretty amazing. We learned when we were there that this particular mountain hideaway had some real sort of global political significance. On the left here is Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the president of Russia. On the right was Chancellor Helmut Kohl of West Germany, I believe. And the deal that brought down the Berlin Wall and united Germany from East and West Germany was actually signed on the table that we were eating our snacks on in the evening. So pretty cool to be sort of in that kind of spot on a ski trip. This here is Valentina. She has been working there since 1978. And she's the caretaker of this mansion. And apparently it gets used back in the old days, in the 70s and 80s, it was used fairly often, 4 times a year. But nowadays it's not even used every year. And so she stays up there by herself in isolation. And we were just trying to imagine the stories that she could tell. One night we got her a little bit drunk with some vodka and hoped we could get some stories out of her. And the best she did was tell us that there were actually secret passageways underneath the hideaway, like literally like one of those bookcases that pulls out that takes you down like a little spiral stairs into a series of tunnels in case the place got raided and they had to run away. So that was kind of cool. Had a really sweet snowcat, and if you've ever been to Russia, you'll see a lot of strange stuff like this, which is kind of fun. And if you needed to go to the hospital, the old Soviet era ambulances are just classic. It was kind of this weird juxtaposition between this ridiculous opulence and extravagance that we were living in this mansion. And when you compare it to sort of the surrounding countryside and the towns, it was going back like 60 years in time. Old army jeeps and horses were the sort of the main means of transport. So it's a very, very interesting place. And the skiing was really good. So we're on the north side of the Caucasus. Directly to our south is the disputed territory of Abkhazia, which is sort of used to be Georgia. It's really messy over there with recent wars and these sorts of things. But the skiing was really good. We were kind of riding the borderline and sneaking our heli under the radar defenses to make sure that they didn't think that we were invading or anything like that. But man, big mountains and big terrain. Really good snow as well. Dry powder. Just super unique and a great experience. and deep. We were lucky. You know, you go on one of these ski trips, we were only booked there for a week, but we hit it pretty good. We had some deep snow and a lot of good times. So, and the locals, keep in mind, we're on the north side of the Caucasus Mountains, and there's no tourism there. There's no ski areas near there, and there's no reason that foreigners really ever go to that region. So the locals were quite intrigued at what we were doing there. They were super friendly. They were mixed religious backgrounds in this one little valley. There was all these different religious organizations, and it was just super interesting to see this very, very simple life these people led. This is our driver who was with us for the whole trip, named Igor. He was really stoked to have some tourism business. Tourism on the north side of the Caucasus has really struggled since the Chechnya issues that sort of arose in the last 15 years. And he was so excited that he got us to sign his van, which was kind of a trip. But Igor, after we spent our week in our keys at the Russian mansion, we decided to spend our second week down in the Mount Elbrus area. So we drove, it was about, I think it was around 400 kilometers, and we had to go through 6 checkpoints. And each one of these checkpoints, man, it made you appreciate the way that we get to live in the West. It was just a full interrogation. That, you know, obviously they have some terrorism issues on the north side of the Caucasus, but we got to one checkpoint, the final checkpoint before we arrived at Elbrus, and Igor got into a shouting match with a guy carrying an automatic weapon, and it just escalated and escalated and escalated, and I actually started to really fear for our lives at one point, especially when Igor just basically told the guy to F off and just started driving. And I was just waiting for the bullets to start flying. He drove about a kilometer ahead and then stopped and said he was trying to get Igor to pay a bribe, and he said, "I'm not paying a bribe." And anyway, the bullets didn't fly that day. So, whew. So we made it to the town of Chighet, which is the Elbrus area. Here's the crew, happy to be there. And this was really interesting. So we were there exactly 1 year after the gondola that you see in the background of this photo was bombed by terrorists. And I think they killed 3 tourists were shot by snipers while they skied, which is a fairly terrifying thing to think about. But what we realized is that the locals, because since the terrorist incident, the town basically shut down. They were as quiet as our ski towns here now. And tourism had essentially stopped. Nobody was booking anymore. The only people skiing were the locals. And so seeing a crew of people come in from outside, they were this really genuine stoke to have us there. They've got some really great terrain. This wall that you see here is, it's probably about 1,500 vertical meters, really big terrain, and complex and interesting. We had great powder. And we hired a guide when we got there to help us get through this area. And you can see there's a lot of rocks and cliffs. We were working our way down one at a time, trying to do it as safely as possible. But we were about a third of the way down, and we looked up, and there was probably 20 local Russians just bombing the slope en masse. And we're like, what's going on? Like, why are all these guys coming down at us? And somebody had caught wind that we were there, and the word spread through sort of the local free skiing community, and they all decided they wanted to go ski with us all at once. And we were just like, we were happy that they were excited to be with us, but at the same time we were terrified that they were going to kick off an avalanche and kill us all, because as you can see, this is pretty big terrain. Anyway, fortunately we made it down to the bottom and sort of breathed a sigh of relief. But but that was that's one of those things that you don't really account for when you take off into the mountains, is a mob of 20 people chasing you down in complex terrain. So overall, the trip to Russia was amazing. The people were wonderful and friendly, and they got us so drunk. The vodka thing, if you've never been to Russia, the vodka thing is really real over there. But we had a blast, and it's one of those experiences that really shows you that the government doesn't always represent the people. The people were overall extremely welcoming and friendly and wonderful. And it kind of opened up my eyes to, as a Cold War kid, growing up through all that fear and rhetoric, to actually go and visit these places and see these people was a fun experience. So my next little adventure I'd like to take you on is a place that I'd always dreamed of going skiing, and that is in Kashmir. I wanted to go there for at least a decade, and finally the opportunity came in 2017. And you can see in this photo, I went with Cody Townsend, Kaylin Thorian, Louisa Rosengren, Scott Markowitz, and Cam Sylvester. And it was one of the best trips I've ever done. So when you go to ski in Kashmir, you fly into Delhi, and Delhi is complete madness. And I tell you, we think we have it tough here in the Western world, going through this whole COVID-19 isolation and all the measures that we have to do. But I tell you, if you spend time in a place like Delhi and you imagine trying to lock that city down and keep people inside, it's just a level beyond imaginable. Just the density of people and the tiny little spaces that they live in. I'm really feeling deeply for what's going on. And they have like very severe threats right now. I believe you can be jailed if you are caught outside of your place in India right now. So it's a very real thing over there. So you fly into Delhi, and then you make your way to Kashmir. So if you're not familiar with Kashmir, Kashmir is a mess. It is it's up in this. Let me see if I can get no, I don't have my cursor here, but you see India in brown, Pakistan in green, and where the darker green and the darker brown and the darker red are, the red is China. That's Kashmir, and it's a region that's been disputed for so much of its existence. It's when the subcontinent, when the British left in 1947, and I'm not an expert on this, so I'm sure there's people listening that know way more than me, but here's just what I sort of basically know. When the Indian subcontinent broke up and the British left in 1947, the country of India was formed, the country of Pakistan, and there was a dispute over who was going to claim Kashmir. And that's why you see those darker colors up there. Even at one point, the Chinese were in there. And it's been kind of a mess for those people ever since. India controls most of it, but there's a line of control, and Pakistan has a section, and it's a really, really challenging place for those people, because the Kashmiris are Kashmiris. They're a unique type of people being sort of caught in the middle of this tug of war between these mega nations, and they're going through a real hard time. For the last many years, they sort of ebb and flow through times where there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of disruption to daily life. And most recently, on August 4th, 2019, the Indian government changed some rules on the way they were going to govern Kashmir, and it sent the area into a bit of chaos. They've actually, we think we've been on lockdown for 2.5, 3 weeks, but these people have essentially been locked down since beginning of August 2019, and they don't have internet. They took the internet away. It is completely wild to think. They can't meet in groups of larger than 4. Their businesses and their tourism industry has completely collapsed, and it's really tough. I still keep in touch with a couple of people that were on, that helped us on our trip, and they've been finding ways to sneak some internet here and there, but it's been really tough for them. But Kashmir is unique. It's a Muslim area, and our goal was to go skiing at Gulmarg, which is the main ski area in that region. And you fly into the town of Srinagar, and the first thing you notice when you get off the plane is that there are so many military folk, so many police, and they're all carrying automatic weapons. And I remember our plane landing and being surrounded by like 10 guys in full camo gear with just their eyes showing, and all of them holding automatic weapons as we got off the plane. So it was kind of freaky at first, but it is pretty interesting how quickly you get used to that. Another thing that surprised me about Kashmir is when you drive from the airport, Srinagar, up to the mountains, you see all these big houses. I'd always, I think for me at least, in these countries that aren't as developed as we are in the West, you think that people live in these tiny little shacks, or, that it's really tough living. But you can see here, these are just typical houses that you see on the outskirts of Srinagar everywhere. People, they live quite well, actually, and they've come from a time where they had a lot of wealth and a lot of resources. The third thing that struck me was there is monkeys. There were monkeys everywhere, in the trees. You get out of your hotel in the morning, there'll be a monkey standing there, and they're kind of nasty. They're not these cute little creatures. They'll steal your bag. They'll steal any food you have, and they've got huge teeth. So arriving in Gulmarg, the ski area is actually quite big, but down at the base is an area with a lot of beginner terrain. And it was really cool to see the locals come out to ski. It cost, I think ski rentals were $2, and a lift ticket on these lower lifts was about $2. It was like $4 for a day to go skiing. And they come out and they're so enthusiastic and fired up to do this. This is like for us, it's an escape for them. Going up to the mountains is this way to do something special, and they're so proud of Kashmir. Everyone says it's a paradise on earth. It's paradise. It's paradise, and it is an incredibly beautiful area, and full of some really great people, including this guy. This is Mushtaq Mir. He was our guide, and Mushtaq is actually the guy who I stay in contact with. You may know Mushtaq if there was a video going around Facebook a year or two ago of this big, giant bowl, and a skier coming down, just making slow S turns way down in the bowl, and he's just kind of cruising along, and then all of a sudden, like, the entire bowl fractures. I don't know if you guys have seen that. And then the guy with the camera starts yelling, and the skier doesn't even notice. But anyway, that was Mushtaq. That was this guy right here. And he was our guide. He was great. When it comes to guiding in Kashmir, it's a little bit more about showing people around and a little bit less about mountain safety, we'll say. Our first clue that maybe mountain safety wasn't super high on his list is when we went to do our first ski tour and he put his skins on backwards. So if you pick up a local guide, they're great at the lay of the land and sort of getting you through. But mountain safety, you definitely want to have your skills up to speed before you go to Kashmir. At the beginning of our trip, we couldn't have timed it better. We had 3 meters of snow in 3 days. It was some of the hardest continuous snowfall I've ever experienced, and the tree skiing there was great. We had one day actually it was too deep to ski, like we just couldn't get on any terrain. We were terrified of like even the smallest like a roof avalanching on us. But eventually we managed to, things settled out a little bit. We managed to get some great powder skiing. Then it kind of got warm. So we headed down to Srinagar, to Dal Lake, which is just one of those magical cultural experiences. And this was sort of the heart of tourism in Kashmir, especially when the British were in there in the early 1900s to 1940s. There was a lot of tourists that visited, and they would go on these houseboats. This is the interior of a houseboat that we went and stayed on, and there's all these houseboats lined along the shores of the lake, sort of like a throwback to the glory days of tourism, when people would come from all over the world to visit Kashmir and experience the magic of Dal Lake. So we sort of felt like we almost had the place to ourselves, and went out for a morning visit to the local floating vegetable market, which is something, if you ever go there, you have to go experience. It was just really unique, and as much as I like skiing around the world, it's these cultural experiences that really keep me going as well. So finally the skies cleared, we got a little bit more snow, and we were able to get back up high onto Gulmarg and Mount Aphrawat, and we got above the Sea of Clouds and looked out to the greater Himalaya range, and I'm not certain, but I think that's Nanga Parbat in the distance there, 8,000 meter peak, and K2 is just out of sight from there. So being so close to those big peaks was pretty special. And the skiing, of course, was magical. We had fairly stable avalanche conditions, and we were able to really get out and kind of open it up in this really unique terrain, kind of a mix between mellow Alaska spines and Japan with the big birch trees, and really unique and fun and great skiing. So on this day, we took a run out off the ski area into the backcountry that led us down to this small isolated town in this valley called Drang, and this town has no road access in the winter at all. The only way you can get to it is to walk a few kilometers from the nearest road and larger town. And we stopped there, and we met the people, and the people saw us come through the village, because I don't think much sort of happens there, especially in the winter. But they saw us come down and came out and said hello, and it was just really interesting to see this sort of different, very, very simple life that these people lead, where they largely just stay in their village. The kids go to school. The farmers are doing whatever because there's nothing to farm, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of what we're going through, and how life sort of has slowed down and has become more simple. And we chatted with the kids and gave them some candy, and then we gave them some rides in the back of our skis, and had some good laughs, and just shared what it is to be a human. I think we get so caught up these days in technology and trying to keep up with the latest this or that, or social media and all this junk, and it's kind of nice sometimes just to boil it down to its essence. And as tough as this whole COVID-19 thing is, at the same time, I think there's opportunity in it for us to sort of simplify things and get those priorities figured out. And I feel very fortunate to do what I've done and been able to travel and experience these different cultures. And it's really helped shape a bit of perspective, especially when we're going through tougher times like this. So hopefully you can lean on those kinds of things too, and try and keep a positive outlook. Look at the good things that are coming out of this. Obviously there's no shortage of news about the bad things, but it's not all bad. It's kind of what we make it. So that's that. I will pull my screen thing off here if I can. Are we still there? Let me see here. I'll go to the Ross. Did you guys hear all that?
Yeah, Mike, that was awesome.
Right on.
Yeah, that was great.
So I'll go to the questions first here in the Q&A. What location is next on your bucket list to ski? Well, that's it. That's an interesting one because I was on the guilt trip thing with Chris Rubens, and I've been feeling guilty too, and I really cut down on my travel in the last couple of years. I think Antarctica would be really cool, but that's sort of unrealistic at this point, unless we came up with a way to seriously offset that. But I enjoy skiing in weird places. I'd love to go to Morocco. I think Africa would be neat. I've never been to Africa, but anywhere where there's a good cultural experience. I did go the year after Kashmir. I went to Georgia and skied the other side of the Caucasus Range, which was pretty cool. Trying to find this chat here, see if there's anything. Thank you. Let's see here. What did you think of your trip to Whakapapa? We've got some Kiwis on board here. Yeah, I mean, New Zealand is a really great country. My family is Kiwi, but the other half, my wife's from New Zealand. So I've been fortunate enough to spend quite a bit of time in New Zealand, and Whakapapa is a really special place. I love the people there. You guys have the worst weather though in the world, I swear. Like, I've never seen wind and just weather, and but it holds a dear place in my heart. Scotty Maisie, Ma, and what's her name? Oh geez, I'm spacing right now. But just such a good crew down there. Really, really always will have a good place in my heart. Where will you head next to see automatic weapons? I don't know. Hopefully not here. Geez, the way it's going. The U.S. was talking about throwing some military on the Canadian border, which is kind of crazy. Let's see here. Oh, have I done a D-spin this year? You know what? I haven't. And that was my big goal for the year. For those who don't know, D-spin is like kind of my signature trick that I came up with like over 20 years ago. And it's kind of become a bit of a mission as I've gotten older to keep doing it and see if I've still got it. I turned 50 this past year, so that was a big goal for the season. I was a little bit busy in January. I didn't have a chance to. And then in February, I started warming up for it and doing some tricks. I actually had a crash, tweak my shoulder. And so that slowed me down a little bit. And then just as I was starting to ramp up and get ready to give it a go in March, this whole coronavirus thing ramped up, and yeah, I haven't been able to ski. So I think it's going to have to wait, but that's okay. Everything has to wait. What do you do? Okay. I think that's it. Thanks for sticking around, everybody. I hope that that you're staying sane in all this madness, and thanks to Ross and everyone that's helped put this together. It's been fun.
Very good. Yeah, thanks so much, Mike. That was great. It was nice to see some inspirational skiing from our living rooms here. Thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks so much for all the guys do for their clinics, and for Leanne, Chris, and Mike. That was great. I can't thank everyone enough for coming on and doing this. This has been so cool to try and put on a little online festival. So it's been great to see everyone participating and to see everyone who's kind of tuning in here to watch. Yeah. So tomorrow we'll do the same thing. Brett, Munter, Christine Falacki are going to share a clinic at 3:30. And then Mark and Janelle Smiley are going to premiere their film from ski race across the Alps they did last year. So yeah, thanks again so much, guys. And then we'll see you at 3:30 tomorrow. Ciao, bye.